Hey everybody, so here's another installment in the Jupiter 2 build. Right now we're looking at the pre-flight time when we're prepping all the parts, starting to look at things, assemble all the tools, all the supplies, and everything that'll be needed to bring this model kit to life. So right on the front page of the directions here, there's a list of a few things. We've got a hobby knife, sprue cutters, rubber bands, clothespins, plastic cement or cyanoacrylic glue, some kind of glue, paints, brushes suitable with styrene plastic. Well, most paints and brushes are suitable, so there's not really any worries about there. Whether you use acrylic, enamels, I imagine oils are good on styrene, but I haven't used them myself, and maybe there's some other stuff out there too, but those are the top three heavy hitters. So I put together the list of tools as they have them listed here, and I've assembled a few other things that are useful too. And what I'll be doing is putting another installment in this, concentrating on basically groups of different tools, and I'll explain that more in a few minutes. So here I usually use cyanoacrylate super glue. This is really cheap at my dollar store. It's 2 of those yellow bottles for $1, which is 6 grams, which definitely lasts a while. There's another form of super glue called gel, which is kind of a thick pasty stuff that is really good for filling seams. It takes a lot longer to set, but just as useful as well. Of course, over here in the blue tube we've got good old-fashioned Testors plastic cement. That also comes in an orange tube as well. I don't really know the difference between the two of them, but either way, Testors plastic cement is always good. And you'll see I've got some Elmer's white glue and some rubber cement here too. Those are good for clear pieces. Plastic cement will usually craze clear plastic, which is basically make it look all hazy and give it some spider webbing effect. And super glue can do a similar thing. So using white glue, that's usually strong enough to just hold it in, which is usually good enough. There are some other specific glues just for clear plastic. I don't have those on hand, so basically all these tools are what I'm assembling that I have on hand. So they also mention the hobby knife, a standard X-Acto blade. Usually I go with a number 11 blade for all my purposes, but I've picked up a power pack basically of different blades for different purposes, and I'll be using those as well. So the sprue cutters, there are specific kinds of tools out that called sprue cutters. What I've got here is some, I don't even know what they're called really, but they're basically crimpers, cutters, kind of for cutting heavy wire or maybe plant stalks, that kind of thing. They should be good, but for the most part, I'm going to be using that X-Acto to cut the pieces loose from the sprue. Clothespins, I don't quite have any of those, but I do have these clamps, which I also picked up at the dollar store, 3 different sizes. I don't know how useful they'll be well, they'll be very useful for a lot of things, so don't let me lead you astray there. If you can find them cheap, definitely go for it. Regular clothespins that you put on the laundry lines, those are perfectly adequate enough. They also mention rubber bands, which is good for holding pieces together while you test fit stuff. In this case, I just pulled out a bag of all sorts of random stuff. I imagine you might have something like this laying around. I think that was the dollar store as well. They only have to be good enough to hold a piece together once. If they last longer than that, then that's really awesome. The rubber bands in the last 20 years or so seem to have gotten real cheap quality. Over here, we'll go to paints. There's definitely a lot of those, and this is one of those things that I'll be mentioning on a separate installment, because there's a lot of tools you can use for paints, and this just barely scratches the surface of it all. Of course, you got your paint itself, jar of thinner, always good, masking tape, low tack, so when you pull it off, like regular masking tape is going to leave gunk all over your model. This blue stuff is really good at not leaving anything behind, so you're not going to damage your finish at all. Q-tips, toothpicks, popsicle sticks, all those are definitely good for mixing paint, applying them, scratching them up, applying small amounts of paint. I've got just regular standard cheapo hobby brushes here. These should generally speaking be good enough for our purposes, but I'll also throw in this batch of brushes here, which is definitely of a finer quality for more specific and precision painting going on. You don't have to get fancy. The bare minimums are really all you need to do this. And rags, of course, for the paint. So in addition, so that's the basic setup as Mobius is laid out. Additional tools that are awfully handy, let's take a look at those. Some needle nose pliers, the bent tip kind and straight. It's good for putting little pieces together. Tweezers, good for holding really small pieces. Dental mirror, haven't really used that too much yet, but it can be very useful for looking around corners, obviously. Just a really old-fashioned box cutter razor blade, always good just to have on hand. Safety tools, gloves, dust mask, goggles, definitely have them on hand. Safety is one of the more important things, obviously, you can be aware of when you're working on stuff, and little chips of plastic do fly around. If we get into any brass cutting, then you know, certainly you want the dust mask on for that at the very least, if not the goggles as well. The gloves definitely for spray painting. Oh, and in addition, of course, to the paint, having various spray paints is handy to have on hand too. For a lot of my primer, I use this Rust-Oleum Auto Primer. Any kind of primer will do, really. I used to use just some generic black and white paint for a primer coat, but really, once you step up to the real stuff, there's really no turning back. This is all like that quick color. I use black and white for most of that. That's $1 at Home Depot. The primer can go for like $3 to $6, and then I've got a selection of others in there too, including some clear mattes and gloss spray paints as well. And up here we've got some Model Masters and Testors spray cans. Not all of these are necessarily going to be useful for what we're doing. There is a specific color call on the back of the directions here for a list of probably like 25 or 30 different colors that are specific to this model, and maybe I've got like 5 or 6. So definitely gonna have to stock up on the paints if you're gonna do this exactly the way the directions have it. Getting back to the tools here, I pulled these out. These are I got at the dollar store. They're generic magnification glasses. So if you've got like one of those clamp-on magnifier, or you got a handheld thing, or even one of these helpful hand devices with a magnifying glass on it, they're glasses, so they just fit on your face. Get a few different powers. They go from like 1 up to 3 in 0.25 increments, 1.25, 1.5, 1.75, 2.5. So a selection of those on hand is really useful. Some scissors, little snips, and generic scissors will do. We use these on the decals when we get to those. If you happen to have a Dremel, always awesome, but if you don't, a regular little pin vise just like this will do as well as a selection and index of drill bits. So I just keep all my stuff in the bottom here, and most of these are probably burned out and useless. I got to replace them. Working with bad drill bits is definitely not optimum at all, but I'm working with what I got on hand. Cutting blades, sanding tools, the standard Dremel assortments, all of that will work with the pin vise for smaller diameter shafts. Files, old dull ones and brand new ones that are really rough, like this nice shiny silver one there with the red handle. And while we're up here, magnets. Definitely useful to have as a tool around your workbench. They're good for storing stuff and keeping things handy, and I think I'll be using some magnets in the model. That's one of the things I'll talk about much later on. And finally, I'm going to get into some electronics as well. So I just pulled this stuff out. There's some LEDs, resistors, some heat shrink, some fiber optics. There's a whole subset of category on electronics that I'll cover in its own installment.